Good morning. There's fire trucks in the background. I hope you can hear me. The music this morning is by a Russian composer by the name of Alexander Chernyshkin. The prelude is a bagatelle, opus 5, number 5, and the postlude will be a bagatelle, opus 5, number 1.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is May 2nd, 2021. My name is Janet Groat, and I'm your worship associate today. We're happy to have Rev Barbara Meyers in our pulpit today. Rev Barbara is a Unitarian Universalist community minister with a mental health-based ministry in Fremont, California. She is assistant director of the Life Reaching Across Life Peer Support Center and author of a mental health curriculum for congregations and author of the book, Showing Up for Each Other's Mental Health. It's published by Skinner House, which is a UU publisher. She is president of the board of the UU Mental Health Network. Barbara, say hi. Hi, Barbara.
Hello, nice to meet you.
And a big thanks for those who help with the service today. Bruce Ruby, who brings us beautiful music, Janet Rader, who is our backup, and our Zoom host, Corina Pelloni. We'll mute everyone to avoid noise in the background. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome all genders, gender identities, races, ages, and backgrounds. If you are new to us or just watching on YouTube, you may want to get to our website at tcuuc.org. There you'll find a link to our newsletters, and you may contact us to be put on our email list. Join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. Coming up this week is our brown bag lunch at the Memorial Park in downtown Stuart, high noon. And in a couple weeks, on the 23rd, we're going to have a lay-led service featuring sacred objects in our home. This is a variation of a service we did a couple years ago. So if you have some sacred objects, it's going to be a show and tell. So start thinking about what you might like to show and tell. Spirit of life, help us to remember to hold ourselves and each other with tenderness and grace as we meet each new obstacle. Let us take 3 gentle breaths. One for ourselves, one for each other, and one for the world. Laura Solomon. As worship associates, we are challenged to bring you into a place which feels a bit sacred. Reverend Bob has asked us to reflect upon the 7 principles and our 6 sources of our Unitarian Universalist religion. We also try to tie in the nature of the sermons. Sometimes it's a real challenge because we've not yet heard the sermon. Today, it's showing up for each other's mental health. Sounds like that just might fit into our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We might also reflect on the second principle, which includes compassion in human relations. It's not all going to be about all our 7 or 8 principles, but you know, the third principle, spiritual growth, no matter how we define it, has to be a component of good mental health. Good vibrations. It's my mantra. It's not all about the Beach Boys. Good vibrations are rooted in Buddhist and Hindu practice. So, good vibes.
Every night and every morn, some to misery are born. Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Joy and woe are woven fine, clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silk entwined. It is right, it should be so. We were made for joy and woe. And for this we rightly know, safely through the world we go.
Now, for our affirmation, we'll speak it first. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung on every land, by every tongue. Amen.
And here we're going to have Reverend Meyers, actually on video, to tell us a story about the badger's bad mood. That was fun. Thank you, Barbara. And you know we do all appreciate each other. We're going to move to our joys and sorrows now. The blue silk represents the river of our lives. Today, it's a waterfall. We mark the milestones, the rough roads, and the stumbles of our lives. Raise your hands to share, and we will unmute you to speak. Please mute yourself when you're done, and we will continue to call on one person at a time. For those whose joys and sorrows are too private to share, know that we are sending you our good vibrations. And now here's Reverend Barbara on video with a pastoral reading.
May we discover through pain and torment the strength to live with grace and humor. May we discover through doubt and anguish the strength to live with dignity and holiness. May we discover through suffering and fear the strength to move around towards healing. May it come to pass that we be restored to health and to vigor. May life grant us wellness of body and spirit and mind. And if this cannot be so, may we find in this transformation and passage moments of meaning, opportunities for love, and the deep and gracious calm that comes when we allow ourselves to move on. The words of Rabbi Rami M. Shapiro.
your support, the free and generous support of each and every member and friend of this community is what fuels our mission. Without your support, the flame of justice, community, and love cannot burn brightly to warm ourselves and to be a beacon in the world threatened by division and fear. John Saxton. Thank you for your support. It will keep our good vibrations humming. Now, here is the Reverend Barbara Meyers.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. So I'll start the presentation now. Okay, I'll start this with a story. Oh gosh, let's see. I'll start this with a story. There was a woman who once told me that she and her husband were trying to visit their daughter in the psychiatric ward every night for their when their daughter was had a severe mental illness, was hospitalized, and they both worked, and they came home from work every night, and they would rush off to the hospital, grab something to eat, and rush off to the hospital to visit their daughter. And there was one night that they got a call from somebody else in the church, and they said, you know, so-and-so in the church has a family member that's been hospitalized, and we're trying to bring casseroles over to their house so that they'll have something to eat for supper and they won't have to worry about dinner. And we're wondering if you could bring a casserole to that person's house. And so they wanted to help out. So they put together a casserole and took it over to their church member's house. And then they went off to visit their daughter. And on their way home, the woman thought, wait a minute, we have somebody that's in the hospital. Nobody's bringing us casseroles. Is there a double standard here? And I tell you that the answer is yes, there is a double standard. Often people who have family members who are hospitalized, or probably is the same thing for rehab for drug use, that are in the in the hospital, and they're rushing off to try to visit and support them, and no casseroles are coming to their home. And maybe some of it is because, you know, people think, well, maybe they don't want to advertise the fact, or they don't tell anybody that there's somebody in their house that's there. But the fact is that there isn't support for folks that are family members who have people in the psychiatric ward. And so the main lesson I'm trying to get across today is, yes, you should support folks that are in, have people in the hospital. this no casserole disease, which is sometimes mental illness is called, needs to stop. So I'll just begin with a few words. It says here, prevalence. 1 in 5 Americans each year is diagnosed with mental illness. And in fact, this has been worse since the pandemic. I've heard numbers of 1 in 4 in the pandemic. So things are, you know, when you think of a quarter of all Americans, that's a lot. Millions, tens of millions of people. So the pews and the Zoom screens on every Sunday morning are filled with people that are living with mental health problems and their loved ones. Just a few definition of terms here. Mental health is the successful performance of mental function resulting in productive activities, fulfilling relationships with other people, and the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity. So it's productive activities, relationships with others, and being able to adapt to change. This is a definition by the American Psychiatric Association. A mental disorder, on the other hand, is a behavioral syndrome, which means a collection of symptoms that create impairment or distress in thinking, mood, or behavior that has been diagnosed by a mental health professional. So all the words here are important. There's impairment or distress, and it affects your thinking, your mood, or your behavior, and it's been diagnosed by someone who knows how to diagnose mental disorders. There's a continuum. I wanted to get this point across too. There's a continuum between mental health and mental disorder. It isn't like everyone's on one side or they're on the other side. People move back and forth and have greater or lesser struggles during their lives, and there's really a continuum. It's not a either or type situation. What is mental health recovery? So this is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Mental health recovery is a process of change in which people improve their mental health and wellness. They live a self-directed life, and they strive to live to their full potential. So improving their wellness, being able to make decisions for themselves, and striving to their full potential, how they see it. It's not necessarily the absence of symptoms or the absence of the need for medications. So people can have symptoms and medications, but they can be in recovery. In fact, that's how I see myself. I'll tell you a little bit of my story. That's a picture of me in 1978 with my 10-day-old daughter, Carol. And I think not too long after that picture was taken, I suffered a very severe postpartum depression, which means afterbirth depression. And I was suicidal, and I was hospitalized in the psychiatric ward of our local hospital. And I felt this was a shattering experience for me. I felt like a damaged human being, that my life was over, and really very, very unhappy with myself. I was one of the lucky ones who, drug therapy was helpful, and I had good mental health care. And I was able to get back to my job and my life as a mother and wife and worker. I was a software engineer at IBM. And after about 8 years of this unhappy existence, even though I was able to get back to my life, but I was very unhappy with myself that I had this horrible experience. I finally told myself that simply don't want to live my life like this anymore, and I want to make any changes necessary in order to live a life that was not so miserable. I went back to my psychiatrist, the same guy that took care of me in the hospital, and I said, I really want to get to the bottom of this and make any changes in my life that necessary. And one of the things that he did as part of a sort of ongoing therapy that I had with him is he asked me what I was doing for myself spiritually. And I said, nothing, because at that time I had not been to church in many years and was not a member of a church. And he asked me, would you like to learn how to meditate? And when he told me that, my first thought was, what? You got to be kidding, sitting around and doing nothing? How is that going to help anything? But I had promised myself that I was going to do anything that he asked, and because I really was dedicated to making a change. And he gave me a little book about meditation, and I read it and sat by myself and, sometimes for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something a day. And it was literally the only time during the day that I wasn't rushing from one thing to another or working very hard on something. It was only quiet time. And after, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, I went back to see him, and I told him, I don't know where it came from, but I'm happy. And I'll never forget what he did. He pointed at me and he said, it came from you. And I realized he's right. There is something precious and unique and holy within me. I never had visualized anything like that. I always thought it came from outside, but it was something that was in me that was precious and unique. It was a completely different way of thinking about myself and about other people, for that matter. And I had a spiritual experience because of that. And in fact, I was re-hospitalized, but this time it was completely different from my first hospitalization. I saw all the other patients as all of God's children, like me. And it was something about that, being able to acknowledge that I was one of all God's children, that was really part of what I consider to be a rebirth experience, and helped me eventually to find my life's purpose and change my career. As I said, I was a software engineer. I worked for IBM for 25 years, and I retired and then went to seminary and became a community minister. And my focus was on working on mental health issues because I thought that's what had brought this inspiration to me. So one of the things that I do is I talk to congregations like yours about what does it mean to have a mental health ministry in your congregation. This is a diagram from SAMHSA. It talks about the whole person. The whole person has many different dimensions to themselves, and in order to heal, it's necessary to look at the whole picture, look at all of what's happening. So what are they doing spiritually for themselves? What are they doing intellectually? What are they learning? How are they improving their minds? What are they doing physically for themselves to keep well? Are they eating? Are they sleeping? Are they taking care of themselves as bodies? What are they doing environmentally in terms of where they live and how they go out in the world and get fresh sunshine and that kind of thing? Do they have enough financial resources, or do they know how to manage the financial resources? What about occupation? Are they doing something with their life that they think is important? Socially, do they have relationships with other people that are fulfilling? And emotionally? Can they help understand their own emotional selves so that they can detect when they are getting into trouble and know how to head it off? And my message bringing this to a church is saying that it isn't just that a person goes to the doctor and gets some pills and takes them and everything will be fine. It's all of this stuff have to be taken care of. And many of these things that are on this list, people in a congregation, just ordinary folks in congregations, can help out by being friends, by having book groups and other things that people can inspire themselves, by encouraging folks to do things physically for themselves. And a lot of these things people can do as friends and aren't covered by professional mental health services. One of the most important things that people can do for themselves is a spiritual practice. And mental health crisis is a spiritual problem as well as a psychiatric one. It's certainly true in my case. And spiritual practice, in fact, has been studied, and the results are that it's the #1 coping skill that people have when they have mental health problems. They pray, they meditate, they listen to music, maybe they have a spiritual director, they might have some sort of engage in Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga, some kind of practice, Eastern religious practice, or chanting. There's a lot of other ones, of course, too, but I guess I just wanted to leave you with how important it is that spiritual practice is a part of coping with mental health problem. There was a psychiatrist in Long Beach who was in charge of a organization called The Village, which helped many people that were very seriously mentally ill. And many of them were able to recover. And one of the things that he did was Dr. Mark Reagan's. He, as a result of his working with these folks, tried to identify how do people change and how do they improve, and what's the first step in order to recover. And he learned that the first step is hope. And it's not necessarily that you know every single thing that you're going to hope for, but hope that there's some way and somehow some things are going to improve in the future. And if someone doesn't have hope, sometimes we need to hold hope for them. So I'll tell you a story from when I was first hospitalized. I was suicidal, as I said, and just thought my life was over. And my doctor said that, he could help me. And I thought, he just tells that to everybody, And my family was very supportive, and they look forward to having me back. And my thought was, they're better off without me. And I think it was the second or third day that I was there. There was another patient came into my room and sat down, and she told me about how she had been in the hospital, I think, for 3 weeks, and she had been very ill when she came in, and she worked with her doctor and was able to have medications and therapy, and she felt a lot better, and she was almost ready to be discharged. And she said, I got better, and I think you can get better too. And when she told me that, it was the first time I thought, maybe there's hope for me. It was an untrained peer patient in the hospital who gave me the hope. And that was really the start of my recovery. It's one reason why I am so sure that peer support is really important in mental health care, is being able to be with peers who have been through it. Another important thing that I have learned is in terms of mental health ministry is the concept of presence. And what presence means if you are with somebody, you actively listen to them without judgment. You validate their feelings, even if you don't agree with their feelings or you don't agree with what they're saying. You at least validate how distressed they are, and that you can see that they're distressed. And you don't give advice. Those are sort of the rules of active listening. Is you're there and you're present with them, you're paying attention to them, and you're not telling them what to do. Presence is a sacred gift, and a lot of times we don't realize how important it is just being with someone. So let me tell you another story. This is when I was in seminary, and in my internship, I was in a fairly large church, and I had just started a couple of weeks before as an intern, and there was a woman who I knew had been suffering from really acute anxiety, and she came up to me one Sunday morning. People were rushing around, getting ready for the service and so forth, and she was just frantic. Please help me. I'm so distressed. I'm so anxious. What can I do, Barbara? Please help me. And I thought, oh my gosh, what? I wasn't sure what I could do. And I suggested, well, why don't we go in the library? There was a room where nobody was there at that time. And so she and I went into the library, and I sat there. I was holding her hand, and I sat there with her, and I was thinking, what in the world can I do? Oh my gosh, what can I do? I have no idea of what to tell her to do. I'm going to be a failure as a minister if I can't think of anything to tell her to do. And so we sat there in silence. And after a couple of minutes, she turned to me and she said, I feel so much better just being here with you. Wow, what a lesson to me. It was my presence, my caring, my listening to her. That was what was healing to her. I didn't have to tell her anything to do. In fact, it would not be a good idea for me to tell her anything to do. It was the gift of being there with her. And I have learned this lesson several times, in numerous times in my ministry, of just knowing that being there is enough. So I'll leave you with that, to let you know that sometimes just being there with someone is enough, and to show that you care. Another thing that I've done and I've learned in my ministry is the most effective stigma buster that I have found. Many times at the end of my sermon, and we'll try it again at the end of my sermon today, for those of you who are here. I ask people if, after I've told a little my story, not because my story is incredibly unique, but because I know that it makes it safe for other people when a person stands up and tells their story. And I ask people at the end of the sermon to rise in body or spirit if they or a loved one of theirs is living with a mental health difficulty. And every time I've done this, it's the vast majority of the people end up standing up. And they all are looking around, and they can't believe there's so many people that are standing up. It's just that prevalent. And then in coffee hour, they can talk to each other about, oh, my sister has bipolar, or I was depressed at one time in my life, or whatever. And because they know that almost everybody has been affected that way. So anything that you do within the congregation has that feeling of, we're in this together, we've all been here. Don't do harmful things to folks that have mental health problems, or you're hurting almost everybody in the congregation. So I've collected a number of ideas of things that help the individual when they're dealing with a mental health problem. These are sort of categories. In the book that I wrote, there are a lot of suggestions under each one of these, but getting professional or peer help, or sometimes both professional and peer help. Some people have had, I should say, a very unsatisfactory or even harmful relationship with professional help, and find a great deal of peer help that works for them. But getting some sort of help outside of yourself, taking care of your body, eating well, sleeping well, getting exercise, that kind of thing, making sure that that is helping. Managing your stress, finding out what kind of things are triggering for you in terms of stressful situations, and learning what works for you to de-stress them. It might be exercise, it might be meditation, it might be creative artwork, or it's different for each person what works for them. Being aware of your emotions so that you realize when you're getting into trouble stress-wise, or getting symptoms of an episode, and being aware that that's happening so that you can learn how to be more in control yourself. Enriching your life in some way, art, music, reading, coursework, some way to do things that enrich you. And then engaging, like I said, with your spirituality. Those are all really important things that help individuals. What about a family and loved ones? They're suffering too. They really want their loved one to get better. And what is it that helps them deal with the situation? A lot of times getting their own professional help or peer help. The group, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, has a program called Family to Family, which helps family members learn from other families who've been there, learn how what helps in their loved one to get better in mental health, learn how to communicate with them effectively and not set off, learn how to not set off problems, things that will be problematic, helping your loved one live with their situation, making sure that they get to their appointments and make sure they have enough medication if they have some subscribed, make sure that they get out of the house once in a while. And finally, don't let this take over your life. Have a life of your own. I mentioned that things were difficult in mental health because of COVID, adding an extra dimension. The kinds of strategies that I have seen that work for this, what we're going through now in COVID, creating routines for yourself, like getting regular sleep times, regular wake times, limiting yourself in terms of exposure to news and social media. And when you do, make sure that it's from responsible sources. Developing attitudes that are going to help you out, like find a way to find humor in things, being non-judgmental and not reactive. We're all going through a tough time, so we just need to cut each other some slack. And then also learn how to so-called reinvent self-care, staying hydrated, eating well, getting outside, exercising, all of those things are helpful in terms of caring for yourself. I want to mention also that mental health is a social justice issue. And there are things that in our society that make it difficult to get mental health care. There's a lack of wide availability of mental health treatment throughout the country. A lot of times insurance companies only, have certain practitioners that you can go to, and many times it's hard to get an appointment. You have to wait weeks or even months to get an appointment sometimes. And this is when someone is in crisis, or they're too expensive and you can't afford it. Your cultural, linguistic, and geographic issues. So people that are Black, Indigenous, or people of color find it very sometimes difficult to find somebody of their own culture that's going to be helpful, or that is supportive of them culturally. If you don't speak English, it can be very difficult to find somebody, a therapist that will work with you. And then many geographic areas that just simply don't have available people. And then also it's very important item, involvement in the criminal justice system. I went to a meeting, in fact, just yesterday, I found out that 40% of the people in our local jail here in Alameda County, California, have mental health issues. 40%. I mean, you don't get well in a cell, as they say, so there are people that are working on this issue, to trying to get more support for folks that are in the criminal justice system, or keeping them out of the criminal justice system in the first place by mental health courts. So all of these things can, if someone's looking for a social justice issue to work on in terms of mental health, there's lots of opportunities here of ways to get involved. All is not really lost. There are many fine peer and self-help groups, and they're free. The place I work is called the Network of Mental Health Clients. And we have one agency that's under that umbrella agency, and it's free to people because we receive our funding from our county. Some local governments have social services that are free or on a sliding scale. And many of those things that I mentioned on what helps the individual don't have a cost associated with them. So it isn't completely a hopeless situation. And I wanted to say that I wrote a book. It's called Held, Showing Up for Each Other's Mental Health. It was published by Skinner House Books last year. The whole point of this book is to show individual congregation members that they can be helpful to folks that have mental health problems and their family members. There is a study guide so that it is set up that you can use it for a book read if you wanted to do that as a way of getting involved in this kind of work. So now what I want to do is ask you to write in the chat, yes, if you or a loved one live with a mental health problem, and write in the chat, no, if you are not. So we'll just see where things happen. Watch what the yeses and nos come up. Okay. Thank you. You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Blessing. Yes. Ready for the closing hymn. Oh, number 1012, When I Am Frightened.
Reassure me
When I'm uncertain,
will you hold my
I
will you be strong for me, sing to me quietly, will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? Will you show me acceptance? And I may learn to give as you do. And I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tenderly? Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
Friends, thank you for your witness to all that exists on the margins. Thank you for your service and commitment to hold yourselves and one another in great and steadfast love. Moving forward from this space, may we continue to nurture spiritual growth, and may we continue to travel along the winding pathway to healing from whatever brokenness we individually and collectively hold, knowing that we do not journey on this path alone. The benediction, the words of Roddy Biggs. Thank you.
Now, after the postlude, we will have some conversation about mental health.